Hello, and in this part 2 IELTS speaking video, I'm going to look at the topic, describe a practical skill you learned recently. You should say what it was, when you learned it, why you learned it, and explain how you felt about it. Now, personally, I have not learnt any practical skills recently, and I think it's probably the case for you. So I'm going to talk about a cookery skill that I learnt, which is not true, and it probably isn't true for you, but it's the best way to answer this question. So let's take a look at the model answer. I was struggling to think of what to talk about for this topic because I haven't learned any practical skills recently, as far as I can remember, but I did learn how to make chocolate brownies a few years ago, so I've decided to talk about that. I've always been a pretty decent cook, but I tend to cook savoury things like curry, pasta and such like, as I don't really have a sweet tooth. A year or so ago, I invited a few mates round for a meal to celebrate my birthday, and you can't really have a dinner party without a pudding, so I decided to have a go at making something. As it was my first attempt at making something sweet, I didn't want to be too ambitious and make something really fancy, so that's why I chose brownies. They're fairly simple to make and they seem to be popular and liked by most people. Although these are somewhat straightforward, I made triple chocolate brownies, so they were slightly more complex than a plain chocolate brownie. And I'd like to add that there is an art to cooking brownies. If you undercook them, they are too runny, and if you overcook them, they are too dry. I was delighted with my first attempt because they were spot on, not too runny nor too dry. All of the guests complimented me and said they were the best brownies they had ever tasted. I would like to say that I have progressed onto making other desserts, but that would be a lie. Every time I need to cook something sweet, I make the same brownies. They are my signature dish. Hopefully in the near future I will try and make a few other things. I'd love to make a lemon tart, but I'm so snowed under with work at the moment, so it'll have to wait. So let's take a look at some of the language. I was struggling to think of what to talk about for this topic. A very useful opening sentence when you're finding it very difficult to know what to talk about. And I think that's the case with all of these IELTS topics because they're very, very tricky. I haven't learned any practical skills recently. Using the present perfect is very good because it really impresses IELTS examiners. As far as I can remember, so it's when you're thinking and you can't remember anything, and so it's a very little useful little phrase, as far as I can remember. So maybe I have learnt some practical skills, but I can't remember them. So as far as I can remember, I did learn, this is when we use the auxiliary did, instead of using the past simple, I learned how to make. I did learn, so we're kind of stressing it by using the auxiliary here. Chocolate brownies, I pick these because it's an easy word to say, they're an easy thing to talk about. So I've decided to talk about that. Very useful to get into your introduction in your IELTS speaking part 2. I've decided to talk about that because you're getting the present perfect in there. I've always been a pretty decent cook. If you are decent at something, you're quite good at it. You're not an expert, but you're okay. Pretty decent cook. I tend to cook, I usually cook savoury things. So when you cook food, you have sweet things like cakes, desserts, puddings, and savoury things are the things that are not sweet. So things like curry, pasta, and such like. I've used this a few times in the recent videos, and it's like saying and other such things and things like this and such like. I don't really have a sweet tooth. Now, I'm not a big fan of using idiomatic expressions like to have a sweet tooth, but I think it works okay in this answer. And if you have a sweet tooth, it means you like things. If you don't have a sweet tooth, it means you don't like sweet things. A year or so ago, this is just another way of saying a few years ago, and it makes it slightly more complex. A few mates, I don't feel comfortable saying this, but I'm an older person. It's more of a young person's word, so if you're a young person, you can say it. If you're old like me, then you can say friends or work colleagues. To celebrate my birthday, good collocation. Dinner party. This is when you invite people round and you all have dinner. A pudding. We have a number of words for sweet things. In the UK, we call them puddings, desserts, cakes, so you could use a variety of these words. To have a go means to try, to have a try. My first attempt, my first try. Ambitious. If you are ambitious when you're cooking, you're making something really big and grand and complex and difficult. So I'm saying I didn't want to be too ambitious and make something really fancy. Something fancy is more like a tart or a cake rather than a brownie, which is quite a simple pudding. They're fairly simple. Fairly means quite. And I could have repeated fairly here or quite. Somewhat is another word that is useful, and you can use it in writing as well. Straightforward. If something is straightforward, it's simple or easy. Triple chocolate brownies. So normally when you make a chocolate brownie, you make a plain chocolate brownie. Now this means that it's just one type of chocolate. However, these are triple chocolate, and what that means is you have milk chocolate, dark chocolate and white chocolate. So you have 3 chocolates in the brownie. So they were slightly more, a bit more complex, a bit more difficult than a plain chocolate brownie. And I'd like to add that, a useful little phrase for IELTS speaking. An art to something is like a skill. So there is a skill to cooking brownies. If you undercook them, so not cook them enough, they're too runny. This is runny when it's too soft and the mixture is not set. But if you overcook them, they become too dry. When cakes are cooked for too long or brownies are cooked for too long, we say they are dry. I was delighted, bit of an old-fashioned word, but I didn't want to say happy. So delighted meaning happy, my first attempt, my first try, because they were spot on. Really good, complex language here, very informal, but perfect for this. And it means perfect. If something is spot on, it means perfect. Not too runny, nor too dry. Nor is just like saying or too dry, so they weren't runny or dry. All the guests complimented me. If somebody compliments you, they say nice things about how you look, about your food. It's giving you praise. I've progressed. I would like to say that I've progressed, and this is like to develop, to making other desserts, puddings, but that would be a lie. Just like saying that would not be true. So every time I need to cook something sweet, remember savoury, sweet, signature dish. If you are a chef, you usually have one dish, one recipe that you have developed and that you cook really well. So I'm saying that my triple chocolate brownies are now my signature dish. Hopefully in the near future, use this in IELTS writing as well, not just saying in future or in the future. It means soon, a lemon tart. But I'm so snowed under with work. I just really wanted to get something idiomatic in at the end here. If you are snowed under with work, it means you have so much work to do, like this poor man here. You're so busy, you have a heavy workload. It's a really, really useful expression because you can put it into lots of different topics. I don't go to the cinema very much because I'm snowed under with work. I don't read as much as I'd like to because I'm snowed under with work. I don't cook as much as I'd like to because I'm snowed under with work. It's one of those expressions that you should write down in your 1 minute preparation time and try to include it if possible. Right, let's take a look at a part 3 question connected with this topic. So they might ask you, what are the most important skills in modern society? Off the top of my head, being able to cook is vital. Firstly, for your health's sake, you need to eat healthy and nutritious meals rather than convenience food, processed foods and takeaways. And secondly, everyone is tightening their belts to save money, and eating out or buying ready meals all the time costs a fortune. So often when you get these questions, they're very, very difficult. So a very useful phrase for a part 3, off the top of my head. So that means I haven't got time to give it a lot of thought. It's a bit like saying the first thing that springs to mind, but every IELTS candidate says this. So be different. Off the top of my head, being able to cook is vital. When you get any question that has the word important in it, try to paraphrase. Essential, crucial, imperative, vital. Firstly, for your health's sake, or you can say for the sake of your health, and it means like in terms of health. You need to eat healthy and nutritious meals, very useful for IELTS writing as well. Don't just think of it being healthy, nutritious, rather than convenience food. So this is ready meals, processed foods, foods made in a factory. You notice I've put an S on one, haven't put an S on the other. Food used to always be uncountable. We now often use it countably. If you put the S, you don't put the S, it really doesn't matter. And takeaways. Lists are very good because it gives you an opportunity to use more vocabulary. And then this is quite a complex expression. If you're quite an advanced speaker of English, then try to use it. If you're not so advanced, I wouldn't worry about it. To tighten your belt. This means to reduce your spending and save money. Eating out or buying ready meals all the time costs a fortune. And if something costs a fortune, it means it costs a lot of money. Hope you found this video useful. Thank you very much for watching.